The old monk was still calmly sitting there, tapping his musk and reciting sutras. After a while he stopped and put down his musk. So Jinhung had also entered the room at this time. His eyes were filled with murderous intent. He looked at the monk but was not in a hurry to make a move. The monk suddenly said, "So Chungwon? Did you say So Chungwon?" So Jinhung was a bit stunned by the old monk's question. The old monk continued, "It is said that the Soseondong family of swordsmen once lived near Yunnan Castle. Is a long-standing family line that has gone through many generations. They pursue ultimate mastery of the sword rather than fame or wealth. The swordsmen of Soseondong are very special, especially their fifth-generation head. His swordsmanship was so fast that other famous martial artists also praised it. He was faster than his shadow, and only the sharp sound of his sword could be heard. After the cut object was broken into hundreds of pieces. I tried my best to blow off my head. But that's what we get with the name So Chungwon. Do you have any other suggestions? Is that an acquaintance of yours?" So Jinhung was secretly startled, so he knew I was following him, right? Thinking for a moment, he replied, "Yes. He is my father." The monk said again, "But I heard that he is a doting husband. And let his wife die from the plague, because he was so miserable that he drank a lot of wine. And smoked a lot of cigarettes and then followed his wife after a few years." So Jinhung widened his eyes in suspicion. "What?" The monk continued. "Then it seemed that Soseondong was attacked and destroyed by a single gang of assassins. However, those are the rumors I heard, but I don't know the truth. It seems like you know more than me about this. I guess from the way you care about this matter." So Jinhung suddenly realized something. He remembered the words his old butler said. That was their plan. The old man and his wife were both poisoned and died. Otherwise, there's no way the Red Wolf gang would dare to attack Soseondong directly. The old man fought until his last breath to open a way out for us. But the poison was penetrated deeply into his body, so within a moment he collapsed. Thinking of this, So Jinhung couldn't help but laugh. How disappointing. If you want to stop me, it would be better if you set an ambush or a trap. Do you really think that those random barks can make me change my mind? The old monk sighed helplessly. So not everyone can use this method. So Jinhung was about to use his sword. You should keep those empty blabbering words and repent instead. The group of assassins who attacked Soseondong was the Red Wolf gang. Their leader was none other than. It's you. Hearing that, the monk suddenly fell into deep thought. After a moment he stroked his beard and sighed. Well, what if it was someone else? This old man was abandoned as an infant. And was raised by the monks of the Golden Dragon Pagoda. Beyond that I don't remember. I've never lived a life beyond the scope of a monk. So according to you, I have been a murderer since I was in my mother's womb? So Jinhung stared at him with wrinkled eyes, not knowing what he was thinking. The monk continued to explain, that look in your eyes shows that you have witnessed many people die, right? How many innocent people have died at your hands just because of those slanderous lies? I tried to help you realize your mistakes. But people like you can't drink alcohol anymore. The two of them then glared at each other. After a while So Jinhung took the initiative to step forward again. Are there just a few words that you want to make this So Jinhung change his mind? If you want me to stop killing people, then surrender your life here. Save those empty words for the meeting with your comrades in the underworld. At this moment his heart appeared again. Present an indescribable feeling. He felt like death was near his eyes. It made his body feel like he was lost in another world. It made him unable to help but tremble. After a while when he calmed down, he looked at the old monk. Saw the old monk still sitting there quietly. In his heart, he was even more confused. What did that old fox just do? At this moment, a wave of power appeared from behind. And the long sword in his hand could not help but slip out from the sheath. He suddenly woke up. No. That source of internal energy does not come from him. He looked at the blade. And saw a shadow on the roof outside. People. The source of internal energy he sensed earlier was coming from this person's body. He did not continue to step forward to finish off the old monk but stood there quietly. The person standing on the roof was empty. The other was Gang Ryong. He stared at his back and thought to himself, I suspected he would continue his assassination. But he didn't expect him to show up so soon. I've been too subjective. But it's okay, come here. So Jinhung saw Gang Ryong again and his eyes immediately widened with blood vessels. The old monk was still sitting in front with his eyes closed. Come here and sit down and talk for a bit. I'll help you realize how far you've gone with what you've done. But something that surprised him happened. Because when he opened his eyes, there was no sign of So Jinhung. He was suspicious, listened to the feeling, then raised his head to look up at the roof. But So Jinhung was like disappears into nothingness, no traces seen. Couldn't hear any sound. The old monk sat there helplessly exclaiming, "Where have you disappeared?" Outside the temple, the trees are constantly shaking. The leaves are falling constantly. The reason this phenomenon happened is because of two people, Gang Ryong and So Jinhung, are using extremely fast speed to chase each other in the forest. Both are extremely careful observing their opponents. So Jinhung moves while remembering the old monk's words earlier. So painful, so he drank a lot of alcohol and smoked a lot of cigarettes. And then a few years later he passed away with his wife. Followed by the words of the old man who raised him. The old man and his wife were both poisoned and died. People like you are not. You can use wine to entertain guests anymore. How many innocent people have died at your hands just because of those slanderous lies? The more he thought about it, the more upset he became. He couldn't control it anymore and shouted, "Shut up, you old man will die." Without hesitation he pulled out his sword and slashed towards Gang Ryong. The speed of his sword attack was very fast, but Gang Ryong's reaction was not slow. His sword strike could only hit the tree trunk behind him. Because Gang Ryong jumped in time to avoid it, Gang Ryong somersaulted in the air and then landed on the ground. So Jinhung failed to attack but did not lose heart, continuing to swing his sword. Gang Ryong let out a breath and raised his hands. I prepared myself to fight and looked at him. So Jinhung then continuously slashed countless swords. Each one of his swords. Almost every time he was about to hit Gang Ryong, he used his extremely fast speed to avoid. One sword and then another. One sword, Gang Ryong kept swerving left and right, leaning back to avoid. In the end he jumped into the air again to avoid. So Jinhung below raised his head and stared at him. In his heart it was extremely unbelievable. I have used so many sword strokes. But this guy keeps avoiding it time and time again like a slippery eel. Who the hell is this guy? Where the hell could a monster name like this come from? As soon as Gang Ryong landed on the ground, he noticed that the clothes on his chest had been torn to pieces. This surprised him. Unexpectedly, he let out a breath and looked at the other person. Let's get serious. I plan to end this with as little damage as possible. But this matter is not easy to decide. So Jinhung also held the long sword tightly, condensing his inner strength. His eyes glowed. He fought with Gang Ryong. But countless memories appeared in my head. Did both my parents drink poisoned wine and die? I thought my mother was poisoned because some bastard put poison in her medicine. That's right, it's your medicine, they poisoned your medicine. It happened so long ago that I was a little confused. Confused between alcohol and medicine? Followed by the old monk's words. This old man has been abandoned since still a newborn. And was raised by monks. You accuse me of being a murderer when I'm not even born yet? The more he thought about it, the more confused he became, even though he kept swinging his sword. But none of them could hit Gang Ryong. Gang Ryong had also begun to counterattack. He didn't dodge anymore but swung his fists and kicks back. This one kick directly caused the rock next to him to break. As soon as So Jinhung dodged this kick, he immediately took out his sword and rushed forward. This one sword of his was extremely fast. It seemed like it could cut Gang Ryong into shreds. But very quickly he realized that what he was cutting was just air. He was still before he could stop being surprised. Gang Ryong suddenly appeared behind him. He had just landed on. He immediately turned around to look behind him. So Jinhung had already turned around and wanted to swing his sword to attack. But his speed was not as fast as his, so he quickly swung his foot and kicked him. Fortunately, he raised his sword in time to block the attack, so he was not injured but was only beaten back. Looking at Gang Ryong's body style, he could not help but fear. The sound of Gang Ryong's body. The old man still kept echoing in his head. Please be careful, young master. Young master, you were right when you decided to kill all the red wolves for revenge. Because they are our mortal enemies. But we still don't know anything about the people behind the red wolves. At least the things we find out ourselves. You shouldn't blindly trust the goddamn information from them. There's no way to be sure that they want to help you. Maybe they were just using him for their own schemes. After a fight, he started getting punched by Gang Ryong until his head bled. He held his head and angrily shouted, "Get out. Shut up those nonsense and get out of my head right now. Wait until this match is over, then say whatever you want." Seeing Gang Ryong continue to rush towards him, he tried his best to swing his sword. As usual, Gang Ryong used his strange body to avoid everything. But this time So Jinhung saw his flaw. He once again raised his sword and stabbed at Gang Ryong. This time Gang Ryong had no way to escape and was hit. But very quickly So Jinhung realized what he was stabbing, it was only Gang Ryong's outer shirt. That Gang Ryong's body had already disappeared. Before he could stop being frightened, Gang Ryong appeared in front of him from below and attacked him. "There's a loophole, hee." He used extremely fast speed to jump up and hit him in the chest with a palm. So Jinhung was immediately hit by this blow, making his mouth spit out fresh blood. His body then, like a kite with a broken string, he flew back into the distance. He was sent flying through the canopy and fell straight down the cliff below. Gang Ryong did not stop and continued to chase, wanting to pursue. But as soon as he got out of the tree canopy, he suddenly stopped in surprise. "Damn, why is there an abyss here?" he said. He stood there looking down. Then jumped down onto a rock in the middle of the stream. He stood there looking for So Jinhung but couldn't see any sign of him. "It was so boring, I don't intend to kill him." In his mind, he remembered the scene of that attack, but he used his sword sheath to block his attack in time. So he probably wasn't seriously injured. I'm sure he hardly suffered any internal injuries, maybe he ran away somewhere. The more he thought about it, the worse he felt. Dejected, I sat down, held my head and sighed. I tried to suppress the strength of my boss. How did things turn out like this? The scene changes to another side. After running away from Gang Ryong, So Jinhung immediately had a few words in his mind. "Have your eyes opened yet? I told you. There will always be someone stronger than you, and no matter who is the strongest in the martial arts world, there is still someone who is his opponent. So don't be discouraged just because of a single failure. Just if you try to complete the mission quickly. While you're still so young, it'll only make things slower. This failure will be a good lesson for you." He slowly walked to the shore from the water. "That's right. You're always right, old man. However, sometimes you'll forget what you said and say something contrary to it later. But this time you were wrong. I haven't lost yet because the match hasn't ended yet. And I was attacked by two of them, what a coward. First that fake teacher provoked me with his words to distract me. And then that fat guy comes to provoke me, if they dare to go solo with me. Then I'm sure of victory. I'll come back to find them soon, after eating the dinner you cooked and resting a bit." He just dragged his body back like that. Accommodation. He opened the door and went inside. But could not hear the greeting sound of the old man. He stood there for a while then exclaimed. The old man would torture his ears all night. Well, he can come back early tomorrow morning. He was just about to turn around and go out when he suddenly felt something, turned his head to look back. There was a group of people in black clothes standing in the house. That old man was tortured to death by them. This damn stubborn old man, he doesn't even open his mouth about So Swandang's sword energy. I've never seen anyone endure this level of torture. We've wasted time here, let's clean up and retreat before that guy returns. But the unexpected happened. Before they could leave, So Jinhung pushed entrance door. His eyes immediately noticed the old man's miserable body on the ground. And memories from when he was young came back to his mind again. While he was sitting in contemplation on the bank of the stream, the old man came over. Asked, "Young master, are you thinking about the old master and his wife?" So Jinhung sadly nodded, "Yes. But no matter how hard I tried, I still couldn't remember their faces." The old man laughed loudly, "Ha ha, it's normal, it happens when you're too young. Come on, I'll describe them to you as best I can remember. His father is the head of Soseondong, nicknamed the Lone Sword. He is a handsome man and a very famous swordsman in Yunnan. His mother is a great beauty of heavenly beauty. He spent his entire childhood under the protection of the old man. The two of them continued to live a life of wandering around the world, walking every day and sleeping under bridges at night. So Jinhung also tried to practice the martial arts that his father left behind. Despite no matter how harsh the weather is, even if it's cold and snowy, the two people still rely on each other. Not only do you have to remember them, but you also have to understand your sword so that every time you swing it is to use all of its power each time. The day he mastered all the powerful sword techniques was the day he placed his blade on the throat of his enemy So Jinhung. He lived like that. During the day he soaked himself in ice and snow to exercise his body. And at night he came back to study the secret of sword chi. Every time he couldn't stand being sick and collapsed, the old man was always by his side wholeheartedly taking care of. Time passed like that, the two of them wandered everywhere, along with the constant progress of So Jinhung. He could now be said to have become a top expert. Started martial arts. But the person who took care of him from childhood to adulthood is no longer there. He can no longer hear the warm words of the old man every time he returns, "Welcome back, young master." He walked up to the old man. His face was as cold as ice without any emotion and he stood there. I don't know how long it took before he knelt down in front of him. The men in black didn't dare to be careless. He stood there silently observing. As soon as So Jinhung put down his long sword, someone swung a chain and pulled him away. So Jinhung did not stop him, letting the other person take his long sword away. After seizing his long sword, the young man immediately directed the crowd to rush forward. Without any hesitation, the crowd simultaneously pulled out their swords. They pointed the tip of the sword towards So Jinhung and threatened. I really didn't think it would end like this. But please give me the secret of the sword. And before he could finish his sentence, So Jinhung spoke. Interrupt. I don't have it. After mastering most of the skills I tore it into pieces and chewed it up. Everyone heard that and were startled. What, are you crazy So Jinhung? The ringleader at this moment, he was suddenly startled to look at the long sword in his hand. What was in his hand was only the scabbard, and the sword was nowhere to be seen. He panicked and turned towards the group of men in black in front and shouted loudly, "Be careful, he's got his sword back." As soon as he finished speaking, blood immediately splattered. All the people were pointing their swords. At the same time, So Jinhung was slashed to pieces by sword energy. He held the sword and stood up. The man in black saw this scene and his whole body trembled. It seemed like he was about to explode. Pants? So Jinhung asked. Why? It was you who offered to help me, so why did you do this? The man in black did not answer but quietly put his hand behind his back and grabbed the hilt of the sword, wanting to sneak attack. But as soon as his hand touched the hilt of the sword, fresh blood splattered in front of him. Terrified, he looked down and saw that he had received a sword strike under his thigh. So Jinhung then swung his kick and kicked him. He was immediately kicked away, lying painfully on the ground, holding his thighs. So Jinhung was in no hurry to finish him off but continued to say, after the incident with So Seondong, the Red Wolf became a notorious gang that made the entire martial arts world tremble in fear. Eliminate them and heaven and earth will gather. You will do everything possible to bring my father's enemies before me. That's what you told me. How much of it is true? Tyrant Zhang Chung? Is that old teacher also my enemy? As for the Red Wolves I killed at your command, how many innocent people were there? What do you mean by wanting to destroy the Red Wolf to eliminate future disasters? The man in black did not respond but still sat there in pain holding his thigh. So Jinhung saw that and immediately walked in front of him. The man in black stammered and blurted out, "You'll kill me sooner or later, right?" So Jinhung coaxed, "Tell me the truth and I'll think again." The man in black couldn't help but laugh, "You're playing a childish game. Do you think I'm a fool?" Quote. So Jinhung stared at him for a moment. Then he raised his sword. "It's a waste of time, just kill you already." The man in black suddenly exclaimed, "So Chungwan, the fifth-generation head of So Seondong. I don't have any children." So Jinhung was startled when he heard that. There was no way to believe. What? The man in black continued, "There is no answer for you. But it is the core of that truth that makes everything meaningless. Okay now, do you still want to know the answer to your question? If you don't believe me, you can go to the area where So Seondong used to be a base before. But find out the truth yourself, this is not too difficult. I bet this old man gave you all kinds of reasons to prevent you from going there, right? So Jinhung stood there with a pensive face and didn't speak. The man in black continued breathing heavily, but if you still insist on knowing, I will tell you. Everything you heard is a lie. The old monk of the Golden Dragon Pagoda was never an assassin. He has always been a virtuous monk revered as a Buddha living everywhere around the Golden Dragon Pagoda. But his existence is a thorn in someone's eye, and that person hired us to get rid of him. So in the end, we were just doing our assigned job by brainwashing living weapons. And so were all the people you killed. No matter who they were. None of them ever had any grudge against So Seondong. When he said this, he was suddenly startled. Because So Jinhung had once again raised his sword to slash him. The frightened young man kept screaming, "Wait! What do you want to do?" So Jinhung didn't listen to him anymore and slashed him. The young man had not yet lost his life but lay there trembling in pain. "Damn, I knew it would be like that, you will never keep your word." So Jinhung coldly turned towards him. "Voice, I told you to only tell me the truth." The man in black angrily raised his head. "Verify yourself, bastard. Go see for yourself whether what I said is true or false. Do you think denying them will make the truth become false?" So Jinhung slowly walked to his side. "I'm thinking like that. But first there is one more thing. Where is the citadel of your Heaven and Earth Association?" The man in black heard this question and immediately bowed his head. "Kill me, you bastard." So Jinhong's sharp eyes stared at him. "I will kill you slowly and slowly, so please try to enjoy it." The house then quickly and continuously echoed the pitiful screams of the man in black. The scene changes to another side. Deep in the forest on dangerous cliffs. Here there is an architectural building placed on a mountain top. Outside there are several silhouettes of people watching. Guard. Looking at their clothes, they could be people from Heaven and Earth Association. Suddenly a flare flew up from below. The flare flew up then split into 5 rays of light. When people saw this light, they immediately recognized it is the signal from that year's team to quickly pull up the bridge. The hanging bridge connecting the 2 mountains together was quickly pulled up, waiting for the suspension bridge to be completely stable. On the opposite side of the cliff, a figure slowly walked towards. Hidden behind the thick fog was the figure of a teenager. This person is none other than himself. It's So Jinhung. Looks like he just ran here after torturing the man in black and interrogating him for information. Because there was still blood on his face. As soon as So Jinhung arrived, Heaven and Earth immediately fell into utter desolation. Right from the gate, sword energy appeared, corpses were scattered. Guards guard outside. They were all lying on the ground with no survivors. Next, the inside of the yard was similar. Swords were running horizontally and vertically, bodies were lying everywhere. In the main hall, the doors were also slashed to pieces. The guards guarding this place also died. Inside the corridors, stairs and basement, no one escaped. So Jinhung, wherever he goes, people from Heaven and Earth will die. He is still killing crazily. After a while of killing, he is also starting to get a little tired. He is constantly killing, panting with sweat pouring out like rain. In the room of the leader of the Heaven and Earth Society. In his heart, there was an indescribable fear at this moment. Damn, what the hell is this? Only had to deal with one guy. So Jinhung quickly arrived outside the door of the room where he was hiding. At this time, the living people of the Heaven and Earth Society were all gathered here waiting. Seeing So Jinhung appeared outside the door, the leader became even more afraid. And the people below also clutched their weapons. I was so nervous I didn't dare breathe loudly. So Jinhung walked outside and suddenly stopped and realized something. He walked to the door and suddenly turned around and stopped moving forward. The leader saw that and immediately waved his hand and shouted, "Quickly grab him." When the crowd heard that, they all rushed outside at the same time. But before they could run out, countless sword energy broke through the door and flew in. There was absolutely no way for the group to avoid being slashed to death by sword energy. Even the leader in the back was slashed by sword energy on the shoulder, causing blood to splatter. The door of the room was smashed. The people inside also died at the same time. So Jinhung slowly walked in. He slowly walked towards the leader. The leader looked at So Jinhung like he was killing a god. Slowly walking forward, a few words appeared in his mind that someone had said to him before. You are stupid to think that this person is like other secret weapons. He is a monster. Is the greatest work I have ever created. He is a masterpiece work of our lives. Remembering these words, the leader of the Heaven and Earth Society could not help but exclaim in admiration. It's true that we keep bees in our sleeves. We just do exactly what we agreed with that old man. Cutting off all ties after a defeat is also part of the deal. So if you have any opinions, go ask that old man. If things have happened to this point, he won't be able to argue anymore. So Jinhung looked at him with a cold face. You and the others keep saying this and that, making me feel uncomfortable. Can grasp. First you sent your subordinates to kill an old man and then now. You said he was cooperating with you all along. You're making a mistake thinking you can sway me. By creating a half-baked story to avoid his fate of death. I've heard too many myths these past few days. The stories you make up are just adding fuel to the fire. Just pray in repentance. The leader was surprised. Death, are you talking about that old man? I understand why you act like that. Turns out that's how you all handle everything. So the 5th demon team has been bribed by that clever old fox. It's not like the idiots died unjustly. So Jinhung glanced at him and said harshly, what are you barking at? The leader shouted, there's no way that old man will die. Go back home and check, you idiot, see if that old man is really dead or not. But if the scene was still intact, that body wouldn't be his. So Jinhung listened and was immediately stunned. The leader continued to explain, you're wasting your time standing here. You idiot. He only needs a few simple tricks to play with you like a mouse playing with a cat, you idiot. What you should know now is not your identity but who that old man really is. The old man who has been with you all this time is. As soon as he said this, the sound immediately stopped. Because So Jinhung didn't want to listen anymore and decisively raised his sword to finish him off. Do you think I'm in the mood to listen to these nonsense? After dealing with the Heaven and Earth Assembly, So Jinhung turned around and left. At dawn he returned to his familiar house again. This place is completely quiet right now, there is no sound at all. So Jinhung walked straight towards the main house. What surprised him was that the house was now perfectly clean. Anyone else coming here would never have discovered this place just last night. There was a group of people who died. So Jinhung opened his eyes wide and stunned at the spot where the old man died. The body disappeared. On the floor, where the body should have been of the Heaven and Earth Assembly people. Now there are no bodies left. The blood stains on the floor have also been wiped clean. He looked at the scene in front of him and immediately felt an indescribable feeling in his heart. He would rather believe this was a dream than believe this was reality. He collapsed, helplessly collapsing to the floor lying there. I was seriously deceived. Scene changed to the Golden Dragon Temple. The old monk was walking in the yard then suddenly remembered something. But come to think of it, why the hell does So Chungwon have a child? Could it be someone with the same name? Not far away. Gang Ryong stood on a tree trunk, attentively observing him. Since the day So Jinhung escaped, he has always been here to observe the old monk. After a few days of not seeing the assassin return, he breathed a sigh of relief. Seems like everything is fine today. Oh my god, what the hell am I doing? Running back and forth to this place 10 times a day. Whether it's morning or night, maybe I should invite him to come stay with me. Gang Ryong then returned to the bar. I'm home. The two people Yeren was talking to heard his voice and simultaneously turned their heads to look at. See, I told Mom, it's obvious that there's something wrong with him, right? You're right, I wasn't paying much attention so I didn't notice. Two people, big and small. For a moment the owner then turned to Gang Ryong and asked Shipper Gang. Tell me now, are you hiding something from us? Gang Ryong was startled. Yes, no, I mean why are you asking this? The landlady continued, because your face looks terrible right now. Gang Ryong wondered, your face? What's wrong with your face? The landlady continued to question, that's right, your face has turned into skin and bones. You look like you've been fasting for 10 days straight. Stop trying to hide it. Report quickly, don't torture your body anymore. Gang Ryong's face was still filled with doubt. Do you look that bad? The landlady nodded. They look like sun bears. Just like when you first came here to work. Yerin from behind also spoke up, but it doesn't look bad. I lost a few pounds and look really cool. The body knows how to walk. Outside, there was a heavy rain pouring down fiercely, mixing with So Jinhong's sad mood. Outside, the rain was gurgling. In the room, So Jinhong was still sitting in a corner absent-mindedly. In his mind, he began to collect the information he had. So Chungwon, the homeowner, does not have a son. Maybe he was mistaken for someone else. He is a faithful husband and does not have a concubine, so his daughter is even more absent. While So Jinhong was lost in thought. Then outside, two people came walking in the rain. He raised his head to look at them without speaking. The two people also stood there looking at him without saying anything. After a while, So Jinhong couldn't help but speak up. The owner of the house is sitting here. Why are you so careless? Get out while you still have legs to go. The big guy heard that and was excited to rush to fight So Jinhong, but was stopped by his companions next to him. We're from Bakema Valley, you've probably heard of this place before. So Jinhong refused to comment. The other continued to explain that wiping out the Heaven and Earth Society is an impressive achievement. But you didn't take responsibility for the mission, so we wasted a lot of time and effort. To find out who masterminded this incident, I'll keep it short. Come to Bakema Valley with us, we'll give you anything you want. Finished those words, the two of them were silent again, waiting for the other's response. But So Jinhong just coldly shouted, "Go away." Hearing that, the other person sighed. It seems we chose the wrong time to persuade you. Finished speaking, put a bag on the ground, then turned around and left. We bought some food here, this will be easier to talk about if your health recovers a bit. We will come back later. So Jinhong didn't pay attention to them. Did he continue to dig into the information he had investigated? A housekeeper of Sosungdang? This is the first time we've heard of this. They live very honestly and simply. The lady of that family takes care of all the big and small things herself. In their house there are 2 maids helping, but there is no one who can be called a butler. He must be the young man who went around the village and asked about Soseondong. Maybe there is something wrong, something he couldn't say. After going to the place where Soseondong used to live to investigate. So Jinhong, even if he doesn't want to believe what the people of heaven and earth say, he has no choice. In my heart, I remember the person who raised and taught me, wondering, old man, who exactly are you? And who am I? A few days later, on a beautiful day, a group of rats were gathering to eat food. Suddenly they all ran away at the same time. What these rats were eating was food. The food that 2 people brought the day before. After a few days when they came back here, the pile of food was still placed there for the rats to eat. So Jinhong didn't touch it at all. It seemed like he didn't eat anything at all. Are you still alive? So Jinhong asked again. Are you the ones who disposed of the corpses? The other person frankly replied, no. But I think I know who did it. After we left, have you thought about that invitation? So Jinhong replied, Bakema Valley? I've been thinking about it a bit. I've heard quite a few rumors surrounding you guys. But in the end, you guys are just a bunch of mercenaries. Do you know what I want? The other person calmly replied, of course yes. What he wanted to know was the identity of the old man who had been with him for so long. Was that true? When So Jinhong heard that, he was immediately startled. He raised his head and looked straight at the other person. Why do you think that? I want to know the identity of a dead person? The other person asked seriously, who said he was dead? Are you sure that the corpse you saw was him? So Jinhong once again opened his eyes wide. The leader of the Heaven and Earth Society also told me that. The other said with a smirk. So he's not that stupid. As for that old man, has he suddenly changed his attitude recently? Like wanting to cut ties with the Heaven and Earth Association? So Jinhong's mind immediately recalled the old man's previous words. While we're here, please stop associating with them. Under the guise of helping you, but in reality they are gradually manipulating and taking advantage of you. Seeing So Jinhong's appearance, the other person secretly felt happy. I guessed right. He turned to So Jinhong again and asked, do you know why he did that? Is because he recognized our presence, according to the information provided by our network. Then Heaven and Earth already know who he really is. He is really very cunning, we have met him once before. But it wasn't until recently that we realized we were dealing with him. When he realized we were watching, he immediately packed his bags and left, and erased all traces of his presence. That was when we were investigating the Red Wolf Gang. So Jinhung widened his eyes. Investigating the Red Wolf Gang? The other person continued to explain. We revealed as many secrets as possible to an outsider like you. If you want to know more, come to Beekma Valley with us. Let me tell you that this is the last time we asked. We won't come back again. So Jinhung thought a moment later. He asked, so what if this whole story was fabricated by you guys to lure me to follow you? As soon as the other person turned around to hear that, he immediately replied, do whatever you want. Those words were said by us, so we will be responsible for them. After saying those words, the two of them turned around and wanted to leave again. But they suddenly remembered something. Stopped. Almost stopped. Then forget it. If you go to Beekma Valley, try to take a detour. Don't go past the foothills of Golden Dragon Mountain. So Jinhung wondered, Yellow Dragon Mountain? The other person explained, there is a monster living there, and I believe you have encountered him once before. Rumor has it that he searches for you every day around Golden Dragon Mountain. It's not that I mean to underestimate your swordsman, it's just that he's not someone you can duel with. I don't want a potential swordsman we recruited to be killed. Where is the prey for that monster? After saying these words, the two of them immediately left without any further entanglement. So Jinhung sat in his seat with his head bowed and thought. A monster? He then raised his hand to hold the long sword. He stood up while leaning on the sword while thinking to himself. That's right, I still have a battle that hasn't ended yet. The scene changed to another side. Gang Ryong as usual, he was delivering dumplings to customers far away. Thank you for the money for the dumplings, thank you and have a good time. Please order again next time. As soon as he received the money, he quickly ran away. Looking at Gang Ryong's back, the others couldn't help but feel sad. Exclaimed, it seems like he's in a hurry. Gang Ryong ran back as fast as he could. I'll stop by the Golden Dragon Pagoda again. For several days continuously running, continuously guarding the realm to protect the old monk. Causing Gang Ryong's eyes to become dark circles and his cheeks to become sunken. As he was running, he suddenly opened his eyes wide in surprise. Because in front of him there was a figure of a person slowly approaching. This person was the person he had been looking for so hard these past few days. So when Jinhung saw him, he immediately got excited. He quickly stopped in front of him, then used his strength to attack. So Jinhung was not weak, he bent down and grabbed the handle tightly. The sword wants to have a duel. Gang Ryong shouted, don't try to run away, you bastard. Attacking both, directly colliding, causing the ground to shatter and dust to scatter. The two people were fighting and constantly moving through the forest. Wherever they went, a part of the forest was shaken. So Jinhung was constantly pushed back by Gang Ryong. Even so he was still not giving up but still fighting steadfastly. Gang Ryong was also surprised by his tenacity. The two fought for a while, then separated. And just retreated, both of them once again raised their weapons to condense true energy to attack the other. And another powerful explosion broke out in the middle of the forest. Not far away, two black men of the Beekma Valley were standing on a tall tree trunk, observing their fight. They thought it would be no more than 10 moves, but unexpectedly it turned out to be more than 30 moves. Could it be that all the descendants of Soswandang's sword energy have reached this level of power? I really can't understand where the old man got this guy from. But surely Soswandang's swordsmanship is the strongest swordsmanship in the world. Learning swordsmanship from just a set of recipes without a teacher is much more difficult than you imagine. I've never seen anyone who knows the Sosyeondong sword fighting before. But do you think he is the best descendant of that sect? Excellent? That's not the right word to describe him. A guy startled, Big brother, what do you mean by that? The other person explained, I have seen the lone swordsman, the 5th generation head of Sosyeondong, fighting another of their successors. And we can say that this demon sword is the perfect combination of them together. If we had to compare, I firmly believe that this demon sword has surpassed So Chungwon in all aspects, both in strength and speed. The fight between the two Gang Ryong below was still extremely fierce. So Jinhung kept turning around and swinging his sword to attack him. Gang Ryong saw that he was fighting harder and harder, and was startled. He did not stand still and took the fight but continuously swung his stick up to block. The match was now starting to have a bit of balance. So Jinhung began to counterattack to push Gang Ryong back. The man in black stood on the tree trunk, observing the battle and thinking. Even So Chungwon could only achieve this level of mastery over his body in his dying years. But for him to have achieved such a vast level of magical powers at such a young age, he is truly a genius. No wonder our female leader is so eager to welcome him. Name next to him asked excitedly, to deal with a high-level expert like him so easily. Is exactly what the leader expected from the Golden Dragon Mountain Beast, right? The other asked again, easy? So why do I see him looking so confused? Confused because he has to face an opponent who should have died in the first confrontation. Because this person is not as easy to subdue as the other person thinks, it leads to both of them feeling worried and impatient. Just like the man in black thought, both of Gang Ryong are impatient. They continuously attacked each other, wanting to win, but it was ineffective. The man in black exclaimed, I really want to watch this glorious scene for as long as possible. But it seems like the battle is about to end, as one of them becomes more and more energized as the battle continues. The other one is gradually reaching the limit of their endurance. I think this is truly miraculous. When he can still swing his sword like that. In this situation, even a small mistake can lead to bitter results. Fighting for a while longer, So Jinhung began to lose some strength. He paused slightly and panted. Gang Ryong did not miss the opportunity to attack. With a stick and pounded straight on So Jinhung's sword. Even though So Jinhung raised his sword, he blocked it. But the ground under his feet was still broken by Gang Ryong's move. And then the ground immediately collapsed, forming a deep hole. So Jinhung stood precariously in the middle of the hole. Immediately, rocks hit him. He slowly fell into a deep hole. Gang Ryong was in no hurry to continue his attack but stood there calmly observing. Witnessing So Jinhung being buried alive, the two men in black couldn't help but be startled. After a while waiting for the ash and dust to disperse, So Jinhung's body lying in the hole, not knowing whether he was alive or dead, gradually appeared. Gang Ryong saw that he had not moved, so he jumped down from the hole. The big guy asked the person next to him, is he dead? We'll be in trouble if he dies. The other person calmly replied, of course not. Gang Ryong slowly approached So Jinhung. Even though he came closer, So Jinhung still didn't move at all. Gang Ryong saw that and didn't frown and sighed. The man in black stood on the tree trunk and smiled. After all, people say it's in hand of a master. With profound internal energy, even a dry leaf can be turned into a sharp sword. But for a swordsman like him, who can slice a wall like a radish. If an old wooden stick can't cut it, it's ridiculous. The person next to him was startled when he heard that, as if he was thinking. Gang Ryong below now slightly bowed his head towards the direction. Down So Jinhung asked, hey assassin, are you sleeping there? So Jinhung was still completely motionless on the ground. Seeing this, Gang Ryong immediately felt a little pity. At this moment, So Jinhung rushed up from below with his sword. Gang Ryong was startled and immediately jumped up and back to avoid the attack. He quickly jumped over the edge of the hole. So Jinhung was determined not giving up. Pursuing him, he swung his sword and slashed at Gang Ryong. After avoiding his attack, he smiled softly, I knew it right away. So Jinhung did not care and rushed forward again. Gang Ryong was startled when he saw that look in his eyes. What the hell, did he lose consciousness? After a moment of retreating, he ran into a cliff. And had no way to continue to retreat. So Jinhung, in front, had already beaten him to death. He took advantage of the moment when he had no way to retreat, and swung his sword to attack him. His eyes had now become cloudy and filled with murderous aura. The man in black in the distance was startled when he saw this situation. Dead, Gang Ryong had no choice but to raise his wooden stick to block. This sword from So Jinhung brought down terrible power. It directly cut through the rock behind Gang Ryong and slashed up the wooden stick. As soon as the wooden stick collided with the long sword, it immediately showed signs of being broken. Gang Ryong saw the blade about to slash his head, his eyes couldn't help but feel big. The wooden stick was very fast was cut in half.